This is episode 1134.
Where we are trying to add as much value to the business via AI right now is less about how do we become power users in finance. We're still trying to build that muscle and figure our way around. But it's more, how do we use our finance skill set to make sure the org is successful as it can be with AI? So what functions can benefit the most from it? How do we think about supporting those? One of the things that we've done things are moving so quick around AI. I feel like when, we would talk about it 3 months ago, it was more novel, less so now, as we've stood up like what we're calling an AI ops team, which is almost like a HR business partner concept for AI, where AI is new to everyone in the org. Can we have a SWAT team of folks that can help people on this journey? So instead of folks having to use free time or extra time to figure out AI things, it's like, hey, I have a use case, but I'm not sure how to do it. And we lean on this team to provide support to the different functions within the org. And we found that that's been a real accelerant.
In a world where AI headlines drown out business fundamentals, Chris Sands reminds us that finance's sharpest edge may still be discipline. At InvoiceCloud, a payments platform living at the crossroads of software and behavioral change, Sands isn't just crunching numbers. He's tracking how people actually move from paper to digital, from habit to innovation. What grabbed our attention is how his team approaches AI, not as a shiny new object, but as a system of accountability, helping every function to use it wisely, not wildly. Our talk with CFO Chris Sands begins after this. Hello, CFO Christopher Sands is back with us. Chris began his career in investment banking and equity research at Barclays and JP Morgan. Before moving into corporate roles, he went on to serve as CFO at Mineral Tree. That's where we caught up with him last. IntelliCare, helping both navigate critical growth phases. Today, a CFO of InvoiceCloud. He's drawing on those experiences to scale a leading payments platform. Hey, Chris, welcome back.
Thanks, Shaq. Good to be here.
So, Chris, we're going to begin where we always do, which is by asking our CFO guest to look back in time. And I didn't mention PwC, but I think that's where your career began. But just go all the way back for us. Where did this path begin?
Okay, well, you hit a lot of it, but you're right. So I started at PwC for a year out of undergrad. I'd studied finance, accounting, and economics undergrad, but knew pretty quickly that I wanted to go the Wall Street route and do investment banking. So went to business school after a year at PwC. And then after business school, I spent 7 years in New York on Wall Street, half doing M&A investment banking. The second half, I was doing sell-side equity research at JP Morgan. I'd say over that 7-year period, I increasingly had the itch to go corporate, ultimately thinking about the CFO role. And so when I left, I felt like I had a great kind of quote unquote strategic finance skill set, but didn't really know the first thing about operational finance, how to close the books, how to run a budget cycle, how to talk to the board, et cetera. So from a career strategy perspective, I was really looking to get discipline in the various disciplines of the finance function. So first stop, I went to a small but publicly traded energy technology company called Internoc to lead IR and treasury, and that was a fairly natural transition from the sell-side research. that company was acquired. I'd say the biggest career insight from that seat, which was my first time sitting on kind of the CFO staff, was the importance of FP&A. And so I was seeking an FP&A role from there. I got that at a recently publicly listed company called Patheon, which was a contract manufacturer for pharmaceuticals, leading FP&A. And so I did that for about 2 years. It was also acquired by Thermo Fisher Scientific. And so I had been in a couple different places where I got experience in the different aspects of the finance function. Both businesses were acquired, and that's when my first CFO opportunity came up at Mineral Tree. So that was a big step for me. Getting the first one, I think, is always the hardest, and it turned out to be a really great experience. So I think when we last chatted, I was early in my tenure there. Ended up being very successful experience for me in terms of scaling the business. We brought in growth equity. We did some M&A, built out the function, implemented systems, NetSuite, built out FP&A. We were able to exit to Global Payments, a Fortune 500 payments company out of Atlanta. So that turned out to just be the best possible first-time CFO experience. From there, I went to a rapidly growing digital health company called IntelliCare, almost like Uber for nurses. And as you might imagine, COVID provided quite a few tailwinds. And so it was a really interesting opportunity to join a business that was growing, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue a year and deal with some of the challenges of that rapid scaling. And also some of the challenges that come with the business normalizing post-COVID, right? I think we all expected that there'd be some normalization there. And that turned out to be the case. And that provided really interesting experience as well. So, was at IntelliCare when I got the call to, look at the InvoiceCloud opportunity, and it had recently been taken private by Vista Equity Partners. And so that just seemed like a really interesting opportunity, and it's been about 1.5 years here and great so far. So happy to tell you more about this.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. Nice, great overview for us. We always like to go back to that one threshold right before you step into the CFO office, and you outlined those nicely for us, the two companies where you had operations role, investor relations and treasury, and financial planning and analysis. You felt CFO ready, I would imagine, at Patheon. After that exit there, that acquisition you talked about, at that point you were board, speaking to members of the board. There was a lot of communication skills that you have, over the last 2 years or 3 years really developed. Am I right about that? Why was that such a springboard for you? It's not always the case.
Yeah. I don't know if you ever feel ready the first time you step into a new role. I feel like imposter syndrome is probably its strongest at each step of the ladder when you step into a new role. I certainly felt like I had the functional expertise, so deep knowledge in finance, deep knowledge in accounting. I got my CPA along the way, even though I never intended to be a practicing controller. But I mean, the things that you hit on are the things that I learned pretty early on are actually the keys to success in this role: the communication, navigating the exec team, navigating the boards, being able to tell compelling stories. All of those matter a lot more than the deep accounting or finance expertise, right? I think by the time you get to the role, it's table stakes that you can run the function well, and where you can really differentiate yourself is your ability to affect change in the business, create value, and deal with all of those parties that you just mentioned.
So, again, there were 2 CFO chapters prior to you joining InvoiceCloud in 2024, 3 high-growth technology companies. What patterns or surprises stand out across those CFO chapters?
I would say the one that stands out the most, I mean, as you know, every business is a little different and has its own challenges and whatnot. The thing that I've seen in the high growth environment is setting expectations too high, and tending to, think the overestimate or overappreciate the good, and the same with the bad as well. And so I think the CFO can actually play a really interesting role in trying to help keep the business grounded, right? When businesses are growing very quickly, people get excited. They feel like they need to invest a ton in the business to support the growth. And, as businesses scale, growth rates, 9.9 out of 10 times slow down. And so the CFO can play a key role in helping navigate through those rapid growth periods and keeping the businesses grounded.
Well, let's find out about InvoiceCloud, your latest chapter. We will have a few more career-related questions for you, however, a little later. Can't resist. Yep. Okay, this is the payment space is crowded. What makes InvoiceCloud stick out? What's distinctive about this business?
Yeah. So, well, first, InvoiceCloud is not just payments. So we are a billing and payment software application. The formal name of the category is electronic bill presentment and payment. But you can think of it as billing and payment software. We sell into businesses that have primarily a B2C use case to distribute invoices digitally and receive payments digitally. And the business has been around for a decade or so, has been owned by several high-profile private equity firms, including Ascendas being public until most recently being private again, and has really found a great spot in helping our clients solve for their biggest pain point, which is digital adoption of invoices and payment. So the key success metric for our business is when customers implement our solution, do more of their customers stop receiving paper invoices, stop mailing in checks, and do both of those things digitally. And so it's a really nice business that combines software and payments. And we believe we have best-in-class offerings around both, and that turns out to be a very powerful combo that helps us, maintain a really impressive growth rate.
So, what are the growth opportunities in the near term for InvoiceCloud?
Yeah, so the business has just this really great foundation of expansion within the existing customer base, just as the broader macroeconomic secular trend of digital payment adoption continues, and more people become comfortable paying their utility bills, paying their insurance premiums, et cetera. So that's just a really great jumping off point for growth in the business. And then we supplement that by going out and signing new customers, and that's both in existing verticals, utilities, insurance, going up market in those verticals. And there's also other verticals that we can go into in the future, consumer finance and the like, that have similar use cases that we just haven't tapped into yet because we've had plenty of growth opportunity in some of the existing verticals. So, we see a long and exciting growth profile for the business for the next several years.
We'd like to know something about your finance organization and whether you're have different priorities when you think about that finance team than you did maybe on your first CFO. You've learned a sojourn. You've learned a few things. How do you organize this team, the structure?
Yeah, I'd say there's nothing terribly novel about how the team is designed. I would say one thing that I have the luxury of having here that I didn't have in the first business, largely a function of the scale of the businesses, but I'd also just say with kind of my own development and understanding of what makes the team successful in the business is we have a strategic finance leg here. So have a person on the team who supports a lot of the special projects, growth initiatives, is doing a lot around our AI stuff now. And I found in a lot of businesses that stuff tends to fall into the FP&A org, and certainly they do some of that here, and it's great. But having that as its own kind of leg of the stool within the finance function, I think is really impactful and enhances the value that the overall team can deliver to the business.
When it comes to partnering with the organization, do you think we're in this interesting time right now with AI adoption and the discussion being rather robust about how companies are adopting it and using it? I'm wondering if it's impacting how you partner, whether finance has found itself in discussions with parts of the business that ordinarily it might not have been, but AI has brought you together. Any examples?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge theme here, as it is in all businesses. And, I like the way you frame the question, because a lot of times when I get it, or a lot of the stuff I read out there is about AI in the finance function. And we're certainly trying to figure that out. But I've found, and I think this is common based on my conversations with my peers at other companies, is that the really good use cases in finance are more nascent or less defined than they are for engineering, development, customer success, sales even. And so, where we are trying to add as much value to the business via AI right now is less about how do we become power users in finance. We're still trying to build that muscle and figure our way around. But it's more, how do we use our finance skill set to make sure the org is successful as it can be with AI? So what functions can benefit the most from it? How do we think about supporting those? I mean, one of the things that we've done things are moving so quick around AI. I feel like when, we would talk about it 3 months ago, it was more novel, less so now, as we've stood up like what we're calling an AI ops team, which is almost like a HR business partner concept for AI, where every AI is new to everyone in the org. Can we have a SWAT team of folks that can help people on this journey? So instead of folks having to use free time or extra time to figure out AI things, it's like, hey, I have a use case, but I'm not sure how to do it. And we lean on this team to provide support to the different functions within the org. And we found that that's been a real accelerant. And so, we try to support that. And obviously we're customers of that team as well. But, for where we are today, we can add more value from my perspective around AI by helping the rest of the org with it and using our finance skill set to understand where the best opportunities to create business value exist, right? Because there's no shortage of vendors pitching AI tools to every single team in the company, et cetera. And so we can be a discerning eye on how we should invest in AI and use it as a business.
Yeah, that's a really great, and strangely, it hasn't been amplified before in our discussions, or at least not enough. And that is, a financial analysis mind at the table would allow some of the business managers to better understand the potential of some of the breakthroughs. Yeah. And some breakthroughs might be just ignored. Like, okay, that was interesting, but without a finance person partnering close enough to help them recognize it. I guess I'm stating the obvious, but it just hasn't been.
But maybe it's not so obvious, right? I mean, you said it well. There's a lot of AI tools out there that you're like, that's cool. Okay, great. Like, what do we get for the coolness, right? And so I think, we don't want to be in a situation where there's lots of cool opportunities to use AI. Leadership is saying we need to be AI forward. And so it's like a binary, hey, we're using AI and it's cool and we check the box because people want us to use AI. We need to find the most impactful use cases. And it's, using AI is not the end, it's the means to the end, right? Which is increased efficiency or growth. And we're certainly building features and functionality into our product that leverage AI. So if you get the growth, you get the efficiency, then you start talking about rule of 70, rule of 60 instead of rule of 40, which is 2015.
That AI team that you described, and forgive me, did it have a formal title within the company? Did it just come to be? It just made sense? There were a number of people on that team that sort of had the mindset or understanding of AI, that it was clear that this was a team that could be a resource to so many parts of the company, or how did it come?
A little bit of that, but it was very deliberate. So the team is cleverly named AI Ops. The creative stuff doesn't come from finance, so I'm not gonna take any flack for that. There were definitely, in the early stages of AI, we saw folks that were power users. They had the genuine interest. It's very clear who these people are in the org because they're way out on the forefront, pushing the boundaries, trying new things. But we had to make the deliberate decision to, okay, let's find these people. Let's bring them together. Let's take them off their other jobs, right? So we literally took people and we're like, we're going to backfill the role that you were doing with someone else because this is your new job. And so we put them on a formal team. We gave them a formal mandate. And that's how we've structured it, right? They're definitely, if you're going to be AI forward as we strive to be, I mean, I think you need to be deliberate about it, and you need to put structure around it, and make sure that you're managing it as you would any other new function that you're standing up in the org.
Is there a compliance piece of it, or not really? That's you're looking more at the growth opportunities with that team, or not necessarily?
They are not tasked explicitly with the compliance piece. There is obviously a very large compliance piece around AI broadly that's managed through our corporate compliance function. But these folks are experts in AI, so the expectation is that they understand the risks, they understand our own policies and how to use them, but they're not explicitly tasked with enforcing the compliance, but certainly need to be mindful of it.
Well, very interesting. I didn't hit you up on you talked a little bit about customer retention with us, I think, but of the metrics that these days you're paying close attention to, what would you share with us? Clearly, customer retention, renewals, what have you, would be a big part of it.
Yeah. I don't have anything super novel on this. I mean, I look at bookings. So we have a lot of forward visibility into our business. Certainly upmarket enterprise can be longer cycles. So, backlog in our business is a very, important concept. So bookings coming into the backlog, implementations coming out. So those kind of three metrics in totality. Then I look at your typical, balance sheet metrics, revenue, EBITDA margin, gross margin, et cetera. The other piece that's maybe a little bit unique to our business is understanding our payment economics and mixes and how they're changing. Payments are very, very dynamic. So we spend a lot of time looking at our payment flows by payment type, mix, the relative economics. Those are hugely important to the overall success of the business.
Excellent. Well, thank you for those, Chris. We're buzzing through here. We are up to our finance strategic moment question. This is where we ask you to look back in time and just identify an experience or a place in time where you saw a risk, an opportunity, and you acted. Anything come to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
Yeah, I'm going to take a little different approach to this, so I hope I don't get in trouble. For me, it was when I was thinking about this question, less about any discrete thing that has happened and more when I realized that to be successful in the role had very little to do with being an expert in accounting or FP&A and all of that. And it was, how do you build relationships in the org and influence folks? And to me, of all of the things that I've done up to this point in my career, the moment I figured that out was when I felt like I was able to truly kind of be strategic, affect change in the business, and drive more value creation in the business. And so when we last spoke, I hadn't had that revelation yet. It was, I had deep expertise in finance and accounting, and I can do all of the work, and it's going to be of high quality. But what I learned, particularly in that first role, is that if I spent the vast majority of my time doing that, then I couldn't spend as much time driving influence in the org, understanding what the business needs to do, and being an agent for that change. And so, again, coming to that realization, and you asked earlier about how you structure the team, structuring the team so that I get enough leverage so I can spend time in the org, working with people across all the different functions and driving change by influencing them based on what I see in the numbers and what I'm learning from the team. To me, that's the biggest moment.
Is there just to play off of this? It's a great conversation. That's a nice standalone for us. Thank you. But how you spend your time? I mean, at the end of the week, do you wake up on a Saturday morning and say, why didn't I get to 80% of what I wanted to this past week? I'm sure it happens, but can you share with us how over time you've had to develop a discipline to make sure you're spending the time on the things you think where the investment of time needs to be made.
Yeah, it's incredibly hard. And I feel like, this afflicts many, many people across many different types of roles. Again, I don't have the panacea here. Certain organizational tools, I've tried time blocking. I religiously use the Eisenhower matrix to, do the to-do list. Saying no to things. Again, blocking kind of what I call deep thought time is incredibly important to kind of take a step back and think about, okay, what are the big things that actually matter in the business? What are the things that just need to get done? And how do I make sure I'm not, spending too much time on just getting through the to-do list without spending time and investing time in the things that are going to move the needle for the business. So, this tension exists daily, weekly, monthly, for sure. I think, just to your point, building the discipline to know that tension is always going to be there and holding yourself accountable and making sure you're carving out time is the best you can do.
Yeah. So I want to just touch on communications with you. Again, you had your tour of duty of IR, which was a really important chapter, I think, in your career. And let's talk about relationships and communication. Learning to communicate with the board and learning to communicate with that all important, and you've done it 3 times now, CEO, CFO relationships. So I don't want to be your relationship counselor, but can you share with us how, over time, some of the takeaways from, having 3 different boards that you had to build relationships with, from having 3 different, CEOs, perhaps.
Yeah. The most important thing. So, and I'll kind of take them in turn, and I've been fortunate along the way to have great relationships with the CEOs I've worked with, and it's, the number one thing that has to be there when I think about a new opportunity. Having that trust and relationship is incredibly important to the success, and communication's a huge part of that. Just sharing everything candidly and early, I think, is key there. With the board, it's hugely important too. All 3 companies I've been in have been private equity backed. And, I think, that can be intimidating in some cases, but the quicker you get to the understanding that, sharing information with them, kind of over communicating with them, is actually very, very helpful. So, I think it's important to have a very open dialogue and help them understand the business better than they otherwise would. I think that's the number one thing they want, right? They're all very smart, talented people. The more we can do and I can do from this seat to enable them to understand the business, what's going on, what matters, how they should spend, the limited amount of time. In the case of private equity, they're on 5 other companies, right? And so they have a finite amount of time that they can spend thinking about our business. Helping them focus on the things that matter and understand that is incredibly valuable, because then you can approach it as a team with the exec team, with the board, and in a more collaborative manner. But that all kind of starts with, one, making sure there's a lot of communication and it's effective communication.
Can you give us some insight? Your career advancement, have executive recruiters been part of it in the past? Is it largely your network, would you argue, or what would you tell us?
A little bit of both. I'd say for the CFO jobs, the first one was through my network. The next 2 were through executive recruiters. And there are a lot of executive recruiters out there, and this job seems to be in demand. So it is
an industry. They do
have a very full email folder of inbounds that come. So, but network's incredibly important. And yeah, again, and that just goes to relationship building, whether that's internally, and I've been fortunate to make great friends along the way everywhere I've worked, and we're in Boston. Boston has a fantastic tech community, and so that stuff is really important.
What's the myths of the first 90 days? What have been overstated? I'll tell you what we hear so frequently. Okay, listen. Yeah. Always listen. You go in and listen. But you've done it now with 3 CFO chapters. You've had the first 90 days. And you've learned a few things. Okay,
Yeah.
I really don't think that's important for me. I have that nailed. It's, there are other areas though that perhaps you realize are important the first 90 days. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the myth is you can have and execute on a 90-day plan. I think the reality is, the first 10 minutes, your butt's in the seat, like, the demands of the business are coming for you. And so, it gets to the prioritization thing that we talked about early and carving out time. For this job, for the others, I've had, okay, here are the things I want to do in the first 90, 120, whatever the days are. I still have that Excel tab in my kind of weekly planner that I keep in Excel, as any proper finance nerd would do. And I look at it, and half of those things aren't done a year and a half in. So, look, the reality is the business takes over. Businesses are dynamic. Businesses have lots of demands for the CFO. And so, you have to adapt to that. And so whether it's 90 days, the number one thing you can do is get into the business and learn as much about it as you can, right? I view the CFO as the chief analyst of the business, right? The financial statements are the synthesis of everything the business does, and no one should have a better understanding of that than the CFO, right? The CEO has lots of skill sets, understands the business well, but probably not, unless they come from a finance background, that kind of last mile into what that means in the financials and how all of that works. And so the earlier you can become an expert on the business and understand what makes it tick and where the pressure points are, the more effective you'll be, and the more quickly you can start to affect change in the business.
Chris, we still always like to have our guests reflect a little on the personal side. What's something, you've been there over a year, but there must be something many of your colleagues don't know about you, something from your past, interest that you have, a sport that you pursued in the past.
I don't know. I'm a sharer by nature, so I'd be surprised if there was much that they don't know. But we're here in Boston. I am a big college football fan. There's not much of a college football culture in New England, so that's people know that about me. I grew up in a University of Texas family. My wife went to Penn State, so we enjoy getting on campus in the fall.
What about a book or a resource for us? Again, doesn't have to be a business book. Might be something you enjoy, something.
Yeah. Well, I like reading HBR. And so that's I think, tends to have good articles and on a lot of career stuff that I find to be pretty useful. I'll save articles and send those around to the teams. For books, I probably rotate between like business profiles and, career type ones. So my wife thinks I have painfully boring tastes in books. She prefers to read fiction. So
listen, we are up to our final question, and we're going to ask you to look forward, and we still end with asking you for your priorities for the coming 12 months. Please provide us with what are those priorities for the coming 12 months? What would those be for you, Chris?
Yeah. So for me, I'd say the number one thing is figuring out how we can support the company in its growth journey, right? And I know it sounds trite, and you're probably going to hear that from a lot, but we didn't talk as much about the journey that the business has been on since its most recent take private, but we've made a ton of great progress in the business over the last year and a half in terms of organizing, shaping the business the way we want it to be. And the business has performed well throughout that period, but we now have the luxury of being, I'd say, even more dialed into focusing on growth. And so, if we get that right, I think everything else follows. And so that's a top priority for me.
Chris Sands, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks, Chad.